Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some Tales from the Squad Car. Our first story today comes to us from this guy right here. I got tricked once. Bad. Let's jump right in. I got dispatched to the grocery store in my district once for a shoplifting report. Apparently, 2 teens were shoplifting and the loss prevention lady had them in custody. When I arrived, they walked me up to the loss prevention office and I see 2 people handcuffed. One of them was a 19-year-old girl. The other was her 14-year-old male cousin. The loss prevention lady is really nice and she and I have worked together before. She tells me, I don't know OP, this one is a little different. So I'm confused and I ask them their names and age and immediately ask what they were doing shoplifting. The younger one says, Officer, I've been living in a car with my cousin here for almost a week and we haven't eaten the whole time. I ask what the heck he's doing living in a car, and he says he and his cousin were living with his mom. He tells me his mom got mad because his cousin lost her job, and she kicked out the cousin. He begged for his mom to allow his cousin to stay, so his mom kicked him out right along with her. Now, I'm no boot, and I feel like I'm pretty good when it comes to throwing the BS flag, but this story was just too convincing. Especially since the items they stole were a couple of bags of chips and a couple of ready sandwiches from the deli. I'm getting worried, thinking I may have a lot more work to do than a simple shoplifting report. The 19-year-old begins to cry, and she tells me, Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to get my younger cousin in trouble. We were just starving. I calm her down, tell her she has nothing to worry about, and we're going to help them. First things first, we have to go to Mom's house to figure out why she is kicking out her teenage son and letting him starve. I grab them both, uncuff them, pay for their food that they stole, and head to Mom's house, who lives about a mile away. I get to the house, leave the 2 cousins in my backseat, and have my partner keep an eye on them. I knock on Mom's door, and she answers the door. This isn't the nicest neighborhood, but when Mom answers, she seems confused to why the police are here. She very politely asks, Can I help you, sir? I get straight to the point. No beating around the bush for this guy. Ma'am, you mind telling me why you kicked your son out and let him go hungry for close to a week? She gasps and immediately changed her tone and asked, Where the F is my car? Excuse me? I'm asking about your starving son and niece. She says, What the hell did they do? Did they wreck my car? Oh my god, I'm so done with this girl. I tell her, hey, your son and niece were caught stealing because you kicked them out. She snaps at me. I didn't kick them out. I told them to go pick up some groceries. Oh my god, do they still have my debit card? What? When did you send them to get groceries? Hell, I don't know, maybe 2 hours ago? I was shocked. Those little bastards had me fooled. Like, all the way fooled. I marched back to my car, asked the little one if he's been yanking my chain, and he hung his head a little low. Tells me he thought I was gonna release them, not bring them home. The 19-year-old tells me she saw that I believed her cousin so hard, she had no choice but to go along with the story. I was furious. I stroked the 19-year-old a theft citation, gave the 14-year-old a firm lecture, gave Mom a ride to the store to pick up her car, and begged my friends not to make fun of me. Thanks for reading, folks. Have a good weekend. Well, OP, it sounds to me like your heart is in the right place. You did the human thing, and it was better to believe them than to take some starving kids to jail. At least you made sure they were, relatively safe at home, although I don't think I'd want to be facing the wrath of Mom when they get back from picking up the car. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Callinson, the honeymoon incident. Let's jump right in. Shortly before the start of the pandemic, much to the surprise of my friends and family and against all odds, I got married to a very lovely woman. Since my wife speaks excellent but not quite fluent French, I suggested we take our honeymoon in France, as this meant I would have an excuse to not have to talk to anyone the entire trip. We arrived in France, picked up a little red Peugeot, and proceeded to try and eat our way across the country. We quickly realized that my wife, who learned to drive in a city notorious for its aggressive drivers, was much better at driving on unfamiliar roads than I was, whose driving style could charitably be described as timid and terrified. We also quickly realized that I was much better at reading maps and navigating, so we fell into a comfortable routine where my wife would drive as I directed her from patisserie to patisserie. About halfway through our trip, we were driving down a tiny countryside road. My wife insisted we were lost, while I insisted that was impossible since I was navigating. We were just taking a very, very scenic route that happened to loop back on itself several times. There was nothing but vineyards, cypress trees, and clear blue skies as far as the eye could see. Okay, in a couple kilometers, we're going to come to the town of something, where we're going to make a right towards the town of, well, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Why do the French insist X is a silent letter again? Maybe it wasn't the best idea to have the guy who can't speak French do the navigating, but we survived. A few hundred feet further down the country road, we came around a bend to a T intersection, where an even smaller lane met the road, heading to the left. There was also a police officer standing in the middle of the road, waving us down. Behind him were two cars parked across the road with their lights on, flares, and reflector panels, the whole 9 yards. The road was definitely closed. As we pulled up to the intersection, the police officer began to walk up to our car. The man was drop-dead gorgeous, perfect Mediterranean tan, thick head of flowing black hair, just enough stubble to accent his perfectly chiseled jawline, with arms the size of my thighs, and wearing a black shirt that your average 6-year-old would struggle to fit into. He leaned into the driver's side window, pointed down the lane to the left, and said, verbatim, French, 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 detour, French, 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 French. Oh, I thought, the road ahead is closed, so they want us to take a detour down this lane, but my wife was still staring at the police officer. Her French was good, but it did sometimes take her a second to formulate what she wanted to say, so I figured it must have been more complicated than I thought, and she needed to ask a question. A couple seconds later, my wife musters all of her interlingual eloquence to reply, huh? Wow, I think. It must be really complicated if she didn't catch it the first time, so Officer Gorgeous repeats himself, pointing down the lane more vigorously for emphasis, French, 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 detour, French, 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 French. My wife stares at him for a couple more seconds. You can see the gears turning in her head. She is obviously preparing a detailed and cogent response. Huh? My wife bats her eyes. At this point, I lean over and say, honey, the road is closed. There's a detour, and he wants us to go that way instead. Officer Gorgeous nods emphatically and walks back to his car. My wife stares at Officer Gorgeous for a few more seconds, turns to me, shakes herself until her eyes can focus on me, and slowly turns the car down the lane. My wife is silent for the next few minutes, but finally says, but you don't speak French. How did you understand that there was a detour? Dearest, the word detour is the same in French and English. And that's the story of how my wife made goo-goo eyes at a French police officer in front of me on our honeymoon. Every once in a while, there's a story that just gets me. And I couldn't get through this French, French, French detour, French, 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 without laughing my head off afterwards. Also, my wife was in the room and she was laughing her head off too, so that didn't help. I've got to mention that even though I'm a Canadian, I can barely read French myself, so I'd be in the same boat that OP was trying to navigate. It just wouldn't go that well. Our next story today comes to us from Proper 17, the youthful innocence of a pursuit suspect. Let's jump right in. It was a fairly smooth night at one of the busiest stations in the department. Had an amazing crew on this particular shift, all proactive and hardworking deputies. We were on night shift and cleaned up day shift's mess relatively quick and didn't have any priorities coming in. Around 22:30, nothing good was out and about to stop, so 3 of us got together. There's a relatively secluded area where large groups of street racers gather. We've broken them up just for fun in the past and watched them scatter like a scene from Fast and Furious. Sometimes they would be gone before we got to the spot because SUV headlights are pretty recognizable. You gotta adapt to what they observe. We decided to go to the spot blacked out and only have the spotlight turned on pointed center and towards the ground, so it looks like 3 motorcycles coming to join the party. As I was mobbing Blasting Wolves by Missio in my unit, we get right into the mix and turn all lights and sirens on. We light it up like a rave full of red and blue. Everyone is caught off guard and scrambles. So now, it's time to pinpoint who is committed to running. I chase 4 cars fleeing where we entered. I get behind one, they pull over, get behind a second car that pulls over. I'm behind the last 2 and they are committed. A Dodge Durango and a Mazda Speed 3. Get on the radio and alert dispatch, I'm trying to catch up to 2 cars fleeing a street racing event. At the first intersection, the Durango jumps a curb and flees in the desert, and pieces of the car spread the desert field. He's gonna regret that, so I decide to stick with the Mazda. Look in the rear view, I see my partner chasing a different car opposite direction. Now I call out the pursuit and advise my partner is also in a separate pursuit. He calls it out on a separate channel. This Mazda is quick, but I'm surprisingly keeping up with it within the city streets, but keeping a good distance for a buffer. Traffic was light this night. The Mazda is blowing intersections with solid reds. I've seen violent felons show less commitment in a pursuit. At one point, estimated him doing 60 to 80 over an intersection with a cross gutter. Catches air and bottoms out, with sparks flying everywhere. I slow down a bunch and still hit it hard to where my light panel above me pops out and is now hanging by the cables. We hit a straightaway towards the freeway and the Mazda starts burning me. The airship was called but is unreliable at times. I knew once the Mazda got on the freeway, I was dust. As we hit the on-ramp, I see the spotlight from the airship in the air and knew the suspect wasn't getting away. So now I slow down to create some distance for public safety and let the airship do its job. At this point, it gets interesting. The Mazda is now blacked out doing 140 plus on the freeway, driving at those speeds on the shoulder and running cars off the road. So our sergeant cancels the pursuit but allows me to trail it. Suspect gets 50 miles away in our sister station's jurisdiction. They pick up the pursuit again and are on city streets again, running stop signs and red lights. Driver runs out of gas and sister station has him in custody. I got to the termination point to pick up my suspect. I open the door, it's an 18-year-old kid who graduated high school a month prior. Looked like a middle schooler. I was shocked but gave him props for his driving skills and also told him that he caused a collision in the process of the pursuit and said my partner hit a stray husky in the process due to the kid's actions. I told him the husky had one brown eye and one blue eye. None of that happened thankfully, but wanted to let that set in him how dangerous that was, even though it was fun for us at the same time. As I'm towing the car, I asked him if he needed anything that he wanted to take with him to be booked in jail. Usually it's a phone and wallet and cigarettes or something. Little guy looks at me and says, "Can you grab my Nintendo Switch for me?" I started laughing and told him, "I got you, little buddy." Kid led me on a 60-plus mile reckless pursuit, driving crazier than most criminals trying to get away, and he asked for his Nintendo Switch. He wasn't our typical clientele and had a youthful innocence to him. My partner's pursuit ended with suspect in custody after he crashed into a dirt embankment 2 miles into the pursuit. Alright, let's just be completely honest here. This kid is an absolute moron who doesn't have enough driving experience to be putting on a pursuit where they're going 140 on the freeway. On the shoulder, by the time they see that first triangle set out for a driver of a broken down semi-truck, they're already too fast and they're not going to be able to get out of the way. Extremely dumb. Don't do this, people. Our next story today comes to us from Jolly Green Spartan. No good deed goes unpunished. Let's jump right in. My sergeant and I were parked next to each other in a lot during a lull in the wall-to-wall crap show that is evening shift, when we were approached by a rough-looking young man. "Please arrest me, I want to go to jail." "Why should we arrest you?" "I actually need a reason, otherwise I'm the one committing a crime." "Well, I'm homeless and I do drugs." "Those aren't crimes, what's up?" "Well, the tribe sent me to a treatment program, but I walked away 2 nights ago. I don't have a phone or any money, and I don't know where the treatment center is." My sergeant knows which treatment center he came from based on a description of the building. I ask the young man if he's willing to go back, and he says yes. So I load him into the back seat and drive over. We arrive at the treatment center, and I buzz for entry. "Hello?" "Hey, this is Officer Jolly Green Spartan with the sheriff's office. I've got one of your patients who walked away a couple days back." Silence for a couple beats, then, "Well, what do you want me to do about that?" "How about your job, butthole?" While I wait for someone to physically come to the door, I give the young man a pep talk. "Look, man, you've got 1 month left in your program. Next time you think about quitting, remember that you spent 2 days cold and hungry and begged to go to jail. Just ride it out. At least here they'll feed you. He nods and agrees that my logic is unassailable, that he'll do better and finish treatment this time. Finally, a woman comes to the door and beckons to the young man who walks inside. I turn to leave, but she motions for me to wait. I don't know if he told you, but he has bed bugs. No, he didn't mention that. I call my sergeant, who directs me to head over to the jail and get my car cleaned by the trustees. You're done for the day, Jolly. Get your car cleaned out and get home for a shower. He hangs up laughing. I go to the jail and get the back seat cleaned out. I call my roommate and ask if they can put a couple garbage bags outside the front door. I park my squad car in front of the house and strip off my vest carrier and uniform into a garbage bag. Standing in my skivvies in the driveway, I take alcohol wipes and scrub all of my duty gear before throwing it into another bag. I dump my uniform into the washer set to the hottest setting, then jump in the shower and scrub myself in the hottest water I can stand. I bug bombed my squad car twice over the next 2 weeks and never got an infestation. I have to admit that I never really thought about getting into a cab or a police car or any other kind of public transportation for that matter and worrying about bed bugs. Really? Just one more thing to add to the list of reasons of why I don't like going out. Our last story today comes to us from Go Die Studios. The time I drove a police car all by my lonesome. Let's jump right in. This is a tale from nearly 30 years ago. It's a bit lengthy, but I hope you'll appreciate it. I was living on a military installation in a small town connected on the outskirts of a metro area in the Midwest. I was 16 years old and had been hanging out with a few friends. I will refer to them as G, then there was my best friend P, and there was also S, who I didn't know as well. G had taken his parents' van out for the night without permission, and we were just mostly cruising around late on a Friday night. We usually took my car, as I was the only one with an unrestricted license. This is important later. He was 15, so he had a restricted license for work and school only, but the van had so much more room to chill out in. At one point, we went to a town a few miles south of us where some of our other friends were known to hang out and give us a little change of scenery. As we were headed back up towards our town, a car pulled alongside of us and was provoking G and P. The girl in the passenger seat was in late junior high with my other friends. I didn't know her because I was one grade further in high school. She apparently had a reputation for getting around already at her age and had a 21-year-old boyfriend. I'm guessing part of that came from her enjoying alcohol, because from what we could tell, they both had been drinking. Well, G gives in to the provocations to race down this strip of road between the two towns. I was telling him not to fall for it and leave it be, but he was listening to P, who was in the front passenger seat, and well, G was the one driving. I sat on the bench seat in the middle behind them, so all I could do was look on. He guns it and is at well over 100 miles per hour on the speedometer. He's laughing his butt off as he's looking back at them, and we are all screaming at him to pay attention. He jerks his head back to see about how he was about to crash into a car driving ahead of us, and he panicked. He let go of the steering wheel and slammed the brakes. Big mistake. He wound up hitting the median in the middle of the road and we went airborne. If only for a moment. And all I saw were the headlights of cars coming at us as we circled around and had done a 180, only to land in a rounded flat-bottom ditch on the other side of the road, facing from whence we came. After we came to a stop, we went and gathered the hubcaps as they had all flown off the vehicle and attempted to get the van to move, but we weren't going anywhere. Besides the fact that the suspension was fairly well torn up in the accident, if I remember correctly, the front axle was bent as well. Somebody had called the cops, so he shows up, we'll call him Officer W, and arrives in his cruiser to gauge what was going on and basically took our statements. S wasn't of much help though, because he had been asleep in the back through the whole thing and didn't wake up till after the accident. Then came a point where Officer W had to take some kind of measurement. I don't know the specifics of it, but I think it was going to be for the tow truck and the winch necessary to bring the van up the slope. The problem is that it required moving his car and him observing it from the outside. But again, he was by himself. Well, he figured out that I was the only other person there who had an unrestricted license. Officer W had me get in his car, start it up, and move it a few feet. As you can imagine, I was given very strict instructions to never tell anybody he'd let me do that, and looking back, I can see how he could have gotten in trouble for it, but like I said, it's been about 30 years. Nonetheless, everybody's parents were called. I was given the biggest chewing by Officer W because I was the oldest. P's parents arrived and I couldn't even look at them because of my own embarrassment over what had happened. G's parents showed up, as did my parents a few minutes later. They were in a bowling league and had been next to each other's lanes that night. Talk about your weird coincidences. I didn't know his parents that well, but they said if I'd been driving, the accident would never have happened. I was grounded for a month and wasn't supposed to see P, but he lived next door to me, and after a couple weeks, we were back to hanging out again. G had longer-term consequences. There were agreements in court that his license would be taken away until he turned 18, especially since he could have been charged with stealing the van and would have to earn the money to cover the damages. I recall that being a couple of $1,000s. I didn't see G much after that, all the more as we had to part ways soon anyway. P's dad was retiring from military life and moved to a small town not far away from there. G's family moved to California, and I moved away a few months after as well because of military orders. Well, OP, I'm glad you're still around to tell us this story because it was a pretty good one, but it also shows how dumb young people can be. I mean, I've had my share of driving way too fast in a car, I can admit that. I've had my share of doing dumb things like all teenagers do. But when we look back on it now, we realize just how dumb it was, and we thank our good graces that we're still alive. Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.